where Washington comes to talk. And AM 630.
WMAL. Yesterday, the United States presented a powerful case that the Syrian government was responsible for this attack on its own people. Our intelligence shows the Assad regime and its forces preparing to use chemical weapons, launching rockets in the highly populated suburbs of Damascus, and acknowledging that a chemical weapons attack took place. And all of this corroborates what the world can plainly see.
All right, welcome back, folks. I'm Dan Bongino, here with you till 7 covering all things Syria today. Busy weekend, didn't expect that. I was driving in, and the president decided he was going to give a press conference on a Saturday. It's not really a press conference, kind of like a speech to a few people. On a Saturday, after a document dump on Friday, there was no other time to do this. It's a very important situation, Mr. President. I think you should do a briefing that people actually hear. Labor Day weekend, too. That even adds to it. I mean, is this a political decision to do that? All right, folks. Again, I'm Dan Bongino. Give us a call on Syria, 888-630-9625. I've got a ton of questions to pose to you, and the answers I don't think are clear. They always make for the best topics to talk about. I mean, what is our immediate national security interest? What? The president said, well, they're going to make a mockery of the ban, the international ban on chemical weapons. Have they already made a mockery? And then after you just heard that opening clip there, all of this collaborates with the world can plainly see. Well, can we plainly see it? I mean, are you convinced? On the line now, we are lucky enough to have Bill Kristol, and we're going to talk with Bill Kristol. He has an interesting piece he quotes today. I'm just looking at it here in Weekly Standard, a twofold task. So, Mr. Kristol, thank you very much for your time in the weekend here. We appreciate it.
Good to be with you. How are you?
Very good, very good. So the first question I have for you is I listened to John Kerry's briefing last week, and I thought the briefing was relatively conclusive. But, you know, are we sure that this was absolutely Assad, or is this still an open question given some of our prior intelligence debacles, which the world community is always happy, by the way, to throw in our faces?
We seem to be pretty sure, and he's used them before, and in any case, he's managed to kill tens of thousands of his fellow citizens, and I do think it's in our strategic interest to remove him. My main concern is that we will do too little, not that we're going to do too much. But I actually think, unlike many of my fellow conservatives probably, I actually think the president might have done the right thing today. Maybe he sort of backed into it almost by mistake, but if we are going to use force, we should get a congressional authorization if there's time, and there is time. I don't know that it's constitutionally necessary exactly, but it's wise to do. Bush did it in 1991 in the first Gulf War. Bush did it again, obviously, for Iraq. So I think it's a healthy debate. And, you know, the questions you were just raising on the air, let's debate them in the country for the next week. Let's debate them in Congress for the week after that. That's the way a constitutional democracy is supposed to work.
Right. Well, I don't disagree with you, but isn't this the time to call back the Congress for a decision so potentially grave? I mean, I'm watching live TV, probably as you are right now in studio. We came down the hall. We were just, you know, everything just happened so quickly. September 9th, I mean, if it's such a grave decision that you felt the need to do a Saturday press conference, which is, you know, having been in the media a whole lot longer than I have, was probably not the best time. Why not call them back immediately then, and let's do this deliberative process where we can come to an agreed-upon conclusion?
Yeah, no, I mean, I would have called them back, I think, maybe last week. I guess this week is Monday, it's a holiday, and then Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year's Thursday, and some members wouldn't be able to be there. And so I guess maybe, you know, look, once you've given up the surprise, which unfortunately I think we did give up by not acting very quickly, Assad has moved all of the stuff around. I'm worried about that in terms of the actual military effectiveness of a strike. But anyway, that's happened already, and presumably nothing much will happen over the next week that would make a strike less effective. So maybe it's, I assume we discussed this with Boehner and Reid and McConnell, and maybe they just decided that it was better to stick to the regular schedule.
Well, one of the things he said, we're talking to Bill Kristol, by the way, and you can read his piece in Weekly Standard called A Twofold Task. I think it lays it out succinctly and nicely, the dilemma we're in now. But one thing the president said in the briefing, which I found a little bit disturbing, you know, when I was in the Secret Service, Bill, we had this thing with the staff where nothing was ever time sensitive, and it seemed to me to be kind of a ridiculous statement. Everything in security, combat, or wars, everything is time sensitive. Information's a commodity. The longer it sits out there, the commodity has a better chance of being taken or spent. So he said, well, Martin Dempsey, of course, who's our one of the leading military officials he's going to deal with every single day, given his rank, said it's not a time-sensitive situation. I mean, that speaks to almost a political statement or extreme naivete. Not time-sensitive. That's insane.
That's a little odd. I think he means presumably you don't have to do something the next hour or two, and that's why you have to, or a day or two, and that's why you have time to go to Congress. Look, I wish he had more of a sense of urgency about this. I wish he could stop saying, "Oh, we're so weary of war, and this is so difficult." And if we're going to do it, let's do it. And I agree, let's do it faster rather than slower. And if Congress is going to act, I'd much prefer that he had called them back for this week, and then we would perhaps be in a position we would have had the national debate already. Having said all that, he's the president we have, and I think given what might have been the two other ways he would have gone, which were to do nothing, which I think would have been very bad, or to act in a really silly little sort of slap on the wrist way and then say, okay, I did my thing. At least now we do get a chance to really seriously discuss what's in our national interest, what the implications of this are beyond Syria, why it is in our national interest, and I think it is, to act. But I think if it's in our national interest, it's in our interest to act decisively and really to go after the regime, to really weaken Assad enough that he may fall, and in any case is really deterred from doing anything like this again, not just a kind of little symbolic slap on the wrist. So anyway, I actually think this debate will be kind of interesting for the country.
We're talking to Bill Kristol, and we do appreciate your time in the weekend. I know you're busy. Well, you brought up an interesting point here, too. Now, I tend to lean along with the libertarian wing of the party, and when your name came up in our pre-show, I said, oh, terrific, because I really wanted to get your perspective, and I almost want to be convinced, but given the three options you just laid out right now, which would be doing nothing, at least publicly. We can there's always things behind the scenes that are happening, of course. Second being a slap on the wrist, or, cruise missile strike, emulating the Clinton policy against bin Laden. And the third option, which just from your prior statement, I'm assuming you're supporting strong and decisive action, which I'm just reading in your piece. When you say strong and decisive action, and I'm not asking you to military hotwash this right now, but are you talking boots on the ground? I mean, what kind of involvement are we talking? And what's the potential endgame there?
I mean, I'm talking something more. No, not boots on the ground. I don't think it's necessary. I don't like it when presidents, though, rule that out entirely. But you just never know what's going to happen. What if chemical weapons get loose somewhere? I don't, object in principle to. We may just have responsibility, especially if we've initiated action from the air. To go in. So I don't like sort of trying to pander to the American people and say, oh, don't worry, there's no chance any American could get hurt. That's just not responsible. I do think that the threat is serious enough that it's worth, a major U.S. military commitment. And, we've done the bombing campaigns before in the Balkans. And actually Clinton did it in 98 against Saddam Hussein, a 4-day campaign, which probably did really degrade his weapons of mass destruction. We didn't realize actually how much it had been degraded but when we went to war in 2003. So, as you say, I tried to second guess the military, to speculate exactly how to do the military action. I wish he would say that we want to get rid of Assad. What comes after Assad could be problematic, no doubt. But leaving a guy in power who's got the presider of a civil war with 100,000 dead, who's killed his own citizens with chemical weapons, who's an Iranian proxy, and Iran's building nuclear weapons, leaving that guy in power, that's really bad, I think, for the Middle East, bad for our allies there, bad for us. And so I would prefer to go for regime change against Assad. It doesn't mean he has to go next week, but weaken him enough, as we did with Milosevic in the Balkans, that he goes. And then I think, it's still going to be a mess, but I think it will be a better mess than it will be if he stays.
Well, we're talking to Bill Kristol from the Weekly Standard. Give us a call, folks, 888-630-9625. We're going to stick on this topic for the entire show today, Syria. My issue there is with the failure in Egypt, and I think, whatever side you lie on the political spectrum, libertarian, conservative, liberal, or moderate, I think we can all agree Egypt did not work out as we had initially intended. I mean, we essentially traded one despot, Mubarak, but kind of he was our SOB, one of those approaches, for a Muslim Brotherhood, which worked out obviously poorly given the outcome. And my fear here, Mr. Kristol, is that if we are to say Assad becomes a casualty of a strike, in that power vacuum with al-Nusra and these al-Qaeda affiliates, does it just open it up to another situation, actually even worse? I mean, I think Egypt at least had some political architecture in place with their military to establish some sanity. My fear in Syria is you just have utter anarchy and chaos with, unfortunately, the terrorists being the most organized.
Look, I think it's a legitimate question. It's one of those things we need to debate for the next week. I think there's been convincing arguments that I mean, if we'd done this a year or two ago, the Al-Qaeda-backed forces would have been much weaker. I think there was a genuine, decent position to our side. It's probably gotten relatively weaker. It's still there, and I think they can be helped to prevail. And I think it's unlikely, from people I've talked to in the region, quite unlikely, really, that a real Al-Qaeda type regime would take over. Obviously, we might have to act to prevent that too. But life's full of these tough choices, and I letting it get to this position has let us get into a very, given us a choice of very problematic outcomes. I still think leading him there is the worst outcome, and especially given what the president has said about the red lines and all that, the damage to U.S. credibility and the degree to which it would just be a huge victory for our enemies. That really makes me think that whole part of the world would have repercussions way beyond Syria. So I'm a hawk on this. But you know what? Honestly, I say this sincerely. I mean, I have my views, and I have them pretty strongly. But we probably have had, in a way, this administration so scared to take on any of the foreign policy debates that they do things, they do them quickly and sort of, almost surreptitiously and apologetically, and then kind of pretend, okay, but don't worry, the tide of war is receding, no problem. Let's have a real debate about what we have to do in the world. Not, and there'll be libertarians, there'll be people like Rand Paul who say, no, don't get involved, it's a horrible mess. And there'll be people like me who say, no, I think it's more of a mess if we do get involved. This actually could be a good moment for the country to have this debate in a pretty serious way.
Well, we're talking to Bill Kristol. One question I have for you, and we'll let you go. I know you're busy today. With Congress not in session, hearing from your constituents, you're out there pressing the flesh face to face. They're not just calling your D.C. office. And I think we can both agree a war-weary public, excuse me, I can't get that out, war-weary public out there. How do you think Congress reacts? I mean, what's the next step? The politics of this right now are awful.
I think right now, if you did a snapshot vote right now, I suspect people would be inclined to vote no. But I think after a week of debate, there'll be a little bit of sobriety and kind of a sense of, it's not fun, it's not nice, people are weary. But, even if you're weary of things, sometimes you got to suck it up and do the right thing. And I honestly think it'll be interesting to see where the public is a week from now. I guess if I had to bet, I will bet in a contrarian way, I'm sure people would give me odds on this, that Congress will end up voting to authorize the use of force. But I agree, right now it looks like the votes it looks like it would go the other way.
Yeah, when you're hearing from those constituents up in your face and they're pointing fingers, it's ugly. So thank you so much for your time. Again, I know you're in high demand today. So Bill Kristol, we really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Hey, my pleasure. Be well.
Yeah. Well, folks, there you heard it. I tend to disagree, but he makes a case for his position. I disagree. I just don't think that right now that our end game is clear, and my fear is that when we put our guys in the line of danger, and our women out there, that there are very serious consequences, and sometimes the externalities of our decisions are very difficult. But I encourage you to look up Bill Kristol's piece. It's interesting. I mean, you have to hear both sides, folks. The Weekly Standard today, a twofold task. And he makes his case, and I think I'll continue to make ours. We have a stacked show coming up. Let me lay out the guests for you, because they're coming in fast and furious, folks. It's going to be a great show. We have Major General Bob Scales coming up, 4:40. Stay tuned for that. We have KT McFarland, who's terrific. She's coming up. She's coming up at 4:40. Major Bob Scales coming up at 4:25, and then at 5:05 we have Mario Mancuso, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense in the Bush 43 administration. So we got some calls on the line. We'll try to take them. Nick, hold on. Tom, John in Maryland, we will get to you. 888-630-9625. 888-630-9625. I'm Dan Bongino. We're talking Syria. Give us a call. I want to hear your perspective, folks. It's your country. Take it back.
Washington's Mall, WMAL, where Washington comes to talk.